Tom Coburn went on Morning Joe on MSNBC to talk about how himself and the other Republicans just filibustered another attempt from the Democrats to raise the minimum wage, stay classy, and he wanted to do a victory lap and shove his middle finger directly in the face of poor working Americans.
I want to ask you about the minimum wage. You voted against it yesterday to raise it to $10.10, or to continue the debate on that anyway. What do you make of the argument now from the White House and from many Democrats who support raising the minimum wage to $10.10 that you've turned your back on hardworking Americans, including those in your home state of Oklahoma?
I think it's malarkey. The fact is if you look at the OMB studies and you look at the good economic models, is the benefit is small. The cost of lost jobs is great. It goes against the free market principles. Susan Collins is going to be bringing forth a better proposal. We don't know what the minimum wage should be. How'd they pick 10.10? Why not 22? Why not $100? That makes everybody make $200,000 a year. The fact is what we have is an economic system on its butt right now because we have poor leadership and poor policy. We don't have capital investment, and we don't have demand creation because of the leadership policies of this administration and this Congress. And I'm saying Republican and Democrat alike. And you're fixing a symptom rather than fixing the problem.
Senator, do you think there's a deal to be had there? I mean, $725, where it sits right now, if you work 40 hours a week, works out to $15,000 a year. That's well below the poverty line, as you know. Is there some middle ground? Maybe it's not 10.10 if you think that's too high, but do you think $725 is sufficient?
No, I don't believe you ought to interfere in the market. If there's to be a minimum wage, my theory is if Oklahomans want a minimum wage, we ought to have it. I don't believe there ought to be a national minimum wage. That's my position. I'm the only member of the Republican Party that's still here that voted no on the last one. And I believe that markets work better than bureaucrats. And I think there's lots of downsides, and there's lots of written in the economics field on raising the minimum wage, whether you raise it $1 or $20. So if you want to prove the point, let's raise them all to $20 or $25 if you want to give somebody a livable wage. Because at $25, you put them at median family income, which has not increased since 1989 in this country, and everybody else is going backwards as the very rich and the very wealthy move way out.
I love how at the end he tries to steal a Democratic move. He's like, oh, yeah, man, it's crazy. These rich people are getting richer, and these poor people, they can't catch up. This kind of sucks. They can't catch up because of you. The inequality exists because of you, because you're voting against a very minor, very moderate minimum wage increase. Oh, my goodness. But look, I'm going to put aside my anger at this issue and just highlight to you, using facts, exactly why he's wrong. Quote, a study by Daniel Aronson and Eric French, and they're economists at the Federal Reserve Bank of Chicago, they found that raising the wage to just $9 an hour would increase household spending by about $48 billion the following year, which amounts to a 0.3% of GDP increase. Okay, we're nowhere near done. Quote, according to a study by the Economic Policy Institute, raising the minimum wage to $10.10 an hour by 2016 would increase wages by $35 billion, and the resulting increase in consumer spending would mean a GDP boost of $22.1 billion. And by the way, what happens when you do that? It would support about 85,000 new jobs. All right, not enough for you? Let me continue. CNN Money says, quote, a Democratic proposal to raise the federal wage to $10.10 an hour got the backing Tuesday of 75 leading economists. The group includes 7 Nobel laureates. Now, notice something. What am I doing here? I'm giving you quotes. I'm giving you specific studies. I'm naming the economists I'm talking about. I'm giving you actual numbers. What does he do? He speaks in vague, broad generalities. Well, when you hear economists say that we shouldn't raise the wage. Really? Can you name any? Fucking crickets. Can't name any. I'm giving you specifics. He's talking out of his ass. Let me continue. A raise in the minimum wage would lift nearly 5 million people out of poverty. It would lead to a Medicaid, food stamps, and welfare reduction Okay, so those programs that these guys always want to cut, they would be cut if you raise the minimum wage. And why is that? Because now you're making it so that people can self-sustain more. Now you're forcing the corporations to stop exploiting their labor, and you're forcing the corporations to pay their own employees enough to survive. Okay? Because right now you pay them so little that they don't have a choice but to run to food stamps and Medicaid and use government programs as a safety net, because the choice are either, okay, my kid starves, or I have to go to the government to get some help. So these guys, it's a lose-lose if you're a poor person, with the Republicans. Because the Republicans tell you, why don't you work? I do work. Why don't you get off the government dole? I can't survive without it because you're keeping the minimum wage artificially low, and that's not enough money for me to live. But I'm not going to raise the minimum wage. See, they set it up so that you can't win. You can't win. I'm still not done. Quote, there are at least 5 different academic studies focusing on increases to the minimum wage, including increases ranging from 7% to 12.3% made during periods of high unemployment. These studies find an increase in the minimum wage has no significant effect on employment levels. The results are likely because the boost in demand and reduction in turnover provided by a minimum wage counteracts the higher wage costs. Also, if the minimum wage simply kept up with inflation since 1968, it would be $10.69 an hour right now. Let's stop there and just reflect on that for a moment. If the minimum wage was simply equal to what it was in 1968, equal to it. Because remember, inflation happens naturally, so today, what the minimum wage in 1968 was, it'd be $10.69 today. How amazing is that? So somebody earning the minimum wage makes less today than they did in 1968. But he's even against that moderate increase to less than what it was in 1968. Okay, still not done yet. If the minimum wage kept up with productivity, so remember, the Republicans always talk about, well, the reason why capitalism is so great is because however hard you work, that's what you're going to get back in return. The harder you work, the further you go. However much you produce, that's how much you make. Really, that's interesting. So why is it that productivity gains, if it kept up with productivity gains, the wage, it'd be $21.72. Why is that? So if we really wanted to reflect the reality of the market, the minimum wage would be $21.72. Not even this measly little $10.10 bullshit that we're talking about, which you still voted against because you're an idiot and because you're unethical. And because you're bought by the corporations, and they want you to keep that wage artificially low because that means more money in their pockets.